thank you for joining us again. Thank you, as always, for your service. Please explain to the committee and to the American public what steps the Fed is taking and expects to take in response to the increase in price level for consumer goods, gas, and groceries.
Well, we are, as I discussed yesterday, we are embarking on a series of rate increases over the course of this year and no doubt beyond. And we're also going to be shrinking the size of our balance sheet as the year goes on. So what those things will do is they will raise interest rates across the economy, and that has the effect of moving demand back down to where it's more aligned with supply and getting inflation back down to a level that we would recognize and that is consistent with our mandate of around 2%.
And what considerations will inform you and your team as you determine the rate at which you reduce the value of assets on the Fed's balance sheet?
So the way we think about that is we want to set and this is the meeting we're going to have in 2 weeks. We're going to set a pace at which runoff will happen, subject to caps, so that if there's more runoff, basically when securities mature, we can just not reinvest that money. We can just give that money back to the Treasury Department, and that's what we do, up to a certain limit. We like to have caps so that it doesn't, so that it's not volatile and it doesn't affect markets. So essentially, it's what we think we can do in ways that won't interfere with market function, and that will get us back expeditiously to a balance sheet which is the one we need, which is just the right size to implement monetary policy, consisting of demand for our liabilities plus a buffer, ample reserves, we call it.
We're seeing right now the impact of geopolitical events on markets, a likely impact on the price level, potentially on unemployment, and therefore on your mandate. I'd like to request that you consider providing this committee with a members-only briefing that would cover 2 subjects. The first is how the Federal Intelligence Coordination Office that connects you and your team with the intelligence community performs in ensuring that you and your team are up to date on the latest intelligence that could provide a forewarning of geopolitical events that impact your mandate and financial markets and the U.S. economy. And the second is a briefing on the resilience of your internal systems and the mechanisms of action for monetary policy in the event of a cyber attack or a continuity of government event, such that you can continue to do your job even if the nation's information technology or financial infrastructure is degraded or under attack. Will you and your team provide to this committee in a members-only or closed or classified setting as necessary that information?
Sure. The second one, for sure. I'm not sure there's a lot to really. Well, we can talk about this offline in terms of what there is to talk about. But we're delighted to come up if you want to have us up for a briefing. If the chair and the ranking member want us to come up, we'll come up anytime.
Okay, we will coordinate that with committee leadership and look forward to making that happen. How do you consider the labor participation rate when you think about what it means to fulfill your mandate with respect to employment?
So it's one of the key measures. There are many, many measures that go into determining what is maximum employment. Ultimately, maximum employment is one way to think about it, the highest level that's consistent with price stability. And so at a certain point, labor supply has not increased, and at the pace that everyone expected it to increase at. It's still below, meaningfully below where it ought to be, even based on its trend. Very hard to understand why that is. There's a great discussion of it in the monetary policy report. So we have to, essentially what we do is we make a forecast, and that forecast now amounts to relatively modest additional improvement in labor force participation. We factor that into how tight the labor market will be. That will give us a view on unemployment, on wages, and things like that. And so that's how we do it. And that's the reason it's fairly modest improvements is that's what we've seen so far.
The chairman's a stickler for time, so I'm just going to get this last question in here. Will you please provide to my office the research that the Fed has conducted or third-party academic research that you consider credible with respect to the distributional effects of monetary policy over the last 15 years, the quantitative easing programs, the massive increase in the money supply from central banks across the world, how that's impacted the Gini coefficient and other distributional and inequality measures?
Be delighted to.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ossoff. Senator Haggard.